Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later because it's time to recognise one of your knights. Which is just my way of saying welcome to this video review of this guy. It's that latter-day live-action Optimus Prime figure now in a Studio Series design. It's the one that some people really don't like and other people really do, I guess. And I have to say, I fall into the liking it camp, even though I kind of understand why people don't like it. But that's not really what we're here for today, is it? We want to know if the toy's good. Now, this is kind of a funny one because I saw tons of mixed reaction to this when it was first unveiled online, but actually I always thought it looked pretty good, but then the reaction kind of warmed up a little bit as it got closer to release, and now that it's finally here, I think it's not bad. Like, it's definitely got some faults and it's got some really good things about it as well, let's put it that way. So we're going to get into all of that today, don't worry, and by the end we'll have the concrete verdict on this thing. Now of course I should mention that this video is brought to you by TF Source. You will find a link to their site in the description below, and you should absolutely go and check them out because they've got tons of Transformers stuff in stock and available for pre-order right now, so what are you waiting for? Anyway, the headline news for this robot mode is that I think it is pretty attractive. And again, I know that the inherent design isn't for everybody, but I've always kind of liked it. There's something about it that kind of works for me, you know, big chest and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know, I just always enjoyed it. And this representation of it in the Studio Series mold, I think looks really good. Honestly, I think the detail's nice, the overall vibe is there. I think they did a great job with it. That said, there are some faults, although the one big overarching downer here is perhaps the sort of lack of painted detail going on. Like, it does look a little bit grey in places. I think you see that most prominently on the head sculpt actually, which is a great sculpt. Like, very detailed, some really nice fine detailing going on in there. He's got little baby blue eyes and things as well, but it's just that grey plastic that lets the side down a little bit and can't help but feel just a smidge drab somehow, but still the actual head sculpt, great. Same kind of goes for the chest area, to be honest. I mean, this is kind of one of the most recognizable bits of this design, and you've got all of that kind of robotic detailing and everything going on there, which again looks superb in terms of molded detailing, but it's just lacking a little bit of a painted finish, like a bit of a wash or something to kind of bring that detail out. That said, the paint that we do have is all nice and crisp and really well applied, and you've got to give them props for this little teeny tiny Autobot logo just there. I think it helps that there's a little bit of a sheen to the blue plastic and it catches the light really nicely, and that's great, but again it just kind of makes this grey look a little bit drab, like it's not silver enough, I think. And you can sort of see what I mean by comparison just here on the shins, because you've got a nice bit of silver going on there, a little bit of gold trim around the knee and a bit of red on the foot, so that actually looks great in terms of paint. Likewise, you know, on the sword there's just that little bit of red towards the hilt, but otherwise nothing, like it's just sort of plain grey details, so it's a really nice sculpt, but again, it just kind of lacks that finish a little bit. And, you know, having acknowledged all of those points, you probably know what I'm about to say about the shield as well by this point, right? Again, though, I want to stress that the sculpting here and that detailing is absolutely superb, and the inherent design is, I think, really, really good. So I can kind of see this guy getting a premium makeover at some point in the future, you know, down the line, more paint and all of that kind of stuff, and I think that will just absolutely soar and really kind of show this thing off to its best. So for now, what we're getting is good, but you kind of can't help but feel that it, I don't know, it just could be that little bit extra, you know? Now, we probably do need to talk about the kibble a little bit as well, because people always have things to say about this kind of thing. I mean, you've got bits of truck just kind of hanging off his leg there. For my part, I think that's actually pretty clean, like it's all kind of concertinaed back up there. We'll see during transformation. And sure, you've got those wheels on the inside there and, you know, various other bits, but the fact that it's got visual evidence of transforming just makes it a Transformers toy. I don't know, if you don't want this stuff, then there is a non-transforming 3-0 effort, for example, so maybe that's more your speed. But I kind of feel like people want these things to transform, but then they're not always prepared for the evidence of it, if that makes sense, and you're never going to get some of these things to be perfect. Things like this, it's got to go somewhere, doesn't it? Yeah, likewise, I've seen quite a lot of comment about the backpack on this guy, and I don't think it's too bad actually. Like, it does stick out a little bit, don't get me wrong, and maybe it could be a little bit cleaner, but again, this truck bit, this whole kind of front end, it's not going to vanish into thin air, you know? I mean, maybe this whole section here could be collapsed down more than it is, you know, I mean, it is collapsed down a little bit here, the windscreen and everything, but maybe it could be flattened with, you know, lots of extra engineering and everything else. But there's also an argument to say, you know, this is not a masterpiece toy at the end of the day, and for the price bracket that we're talking about here and the fact that it's a mass retail toy, I think you've got to consider if more is actually appropriate at some stage, you know? Besides, there is also a bit of an undocumented cheat with this toy, which is that if you raise the backpack up like so, you'll see there's a little mushroom peg just there, which means that you can actually pop this whole backpack off. Very easy to do, just pegs back on again whenever you want it to, but it does make that robot mode a lot more svelte, right? Like a lot more lean. It's not got that whole kind of truck front hanging off the back there. So maybe that's an option if that's something that you want to do. I don't think it really works for me because it's a little bit messy around here and I don't mind it. I'd rather it was kind of complete, you know, but it's an option at least. And again, honestly, for the price point that we're talking about here, I think this design cleans up amazingly well. Like, yes, there's a little bit of kibble, but when you're talking about fairly impossible to transform toys that were not designed to do so from the screen, by the way, like it was a total flub, I think they've translated this one really, really nicely for a kind of retail price point. Now, there are a couple of quirks of the execution mine, the main one being that I wish the chest kind of tabbed in a little bit better just under here. I mean, when you get it locked in solidly, it's not too bad, but it does have a habit of kind of popping out. And I do kind of wish he had just that little bit more solidity in his heels. Like, it's not bad, and he is, you know, he's not going to fall over or anything, but he just kind of has that little wobble to him. I mean, you can see here that it's very hard to get him sat flat-footed on a hard surface, because whether it's the heel or the toe, there's always one bit that's kind of slightly misaligned and kind of gives him that little wobble that I'm talking about, and the ankles are not that stable either. Now, articulation wise, there's quite a bit going on. I mean, the head can look fairly freely from side to side. He can look up just a little bit and not really down, but kind of straight forward. I might like him to look down a little bit more so we can kind of, you know, aura farm. Shoulders are pretty good. I mean, first of all, you've got this little decorative bit on top, which is actually on 2 hinges, so you can really kind of get that out the way if you need to. And the shoulders themselves will come up to just over 90 degrees actually, so quite good motion in those shoulders. No butterfly joint though, in case anybody was wondering. You then get a bicep rotation, and there is double jointed elbows which come all the way up and over for transformation, so plenty going on there. You've then got wrist swivel, and you've actually got a little bit of hand articulation as well. All the fingers are just on a solid piece. Now, there is waist swivel, but you'll need to see it just underneath these kind of hip skirt pieces, the little skirt just there, and then you'll see that it's on a mushroom peg, so if you need to rotate it, you might just kind of need to move these out the way just a little bit. Now, the hips are slightly impeded. They will come to about 90 degrees, just about. If you want to get many further, you can kind of rotate the waist just a little bit, kind of gives you a touch more clearance. And then at the knees, you get a 90-degree bend, although I will say that that kibble, as much as I don't mind it, because of the way it kind of hangs just there, kind of stops against the back of the leg, it does look a little bit odd. You get a very decent ankle tilt all the way to the side, so that is really, really nice. And then you do get a bit of toe and ankle articulation, if indeed you can call that ankle articulation. Is that what that is? But you get all of that movement anyway. All of which means he's not the most articulated bot I've ever messed with, but he is still quite good fun to handle. Like, don't get me wrong, I could have done him with a little bit more give in some of those leg joints to kind of just give that real feeling of flexibility, but it's fine, honestly. Where he comes into his own though is looking mean with his weapons. Now, the sword will kind of clip into his palm like so, and then you just want to close up the fingers, and actually that's very solid once it's in. Of course, the arms have got these very noticeable peg holes, so you can just plonk the shield on the side. Alternatively, you can just peg it into his hand if you prefer. And again, you know, what he lacks in extreme posing, he kind of makes up for with aura. What can I say? He just looks great with the weapons in place. He does have this smaller little dagger style weapon as well, which is pretty cool. And that can be used in several ways. I mean, firstly, you can just peg it into the hand, pretty simple. Now, if you move the wrist just slightly like so, then the small blade can actually be pegged in underneath here as well in true Beyblade style. I don't know if that quite works for me, but it's an option there if you want it. You can also clip it into his backpack for a spot of weapon storage, but it's a tight fit and I might be a bit nervous about some paint rub too. Alternatively, you can do some rather nifty stuff. Now, firstly, with the shield, these front bits are just kind of tabbed in, and you can actually remove them and kind of set them one tab hole back. They just kind of move over like so and repeg in, and then that reveals a little gun just underneath here. Even better, there's a little tab slot underneath here, and that corresponds with a hole just on the little blade weapon, and so you can kind of peg that in underneath like a little bayonet, and that's not even in the instructions, but it's definitely meant to be like that. So that is really fun. Like, it just looks really great. It's a little bit of additional functionality with the shield and that little blade as well. Then of course you can put his shield on his back. Now, the only downside here is that you've got to flip this whole bit up like so to reveal the peg hole for where the shield goes in, and it just kind of pegs in like so, but that is a bit of a compromise, I think. If only because then from the front there's no getting around it. That piece is absolutely going to stick up and look a little bit unsightly, and it's just so bulky now. Like, it looks like he's wearing a really big backpack, like his mum's made him pack an extra jumper or something. However, you can store the sword back here as well. You just need this little adapter piece which goes on there like so. Easy to lose, I suspect, because it doesn't really go anywhere else, but then that enables you to slot the sword through, and then of course you can peg the shield on the back there. And yeah, not gonna lie, that roof section is definitely a visual compromise with the weapons on his back. It just doesn't quite work in the way that I want it to. Such a shame. It also all just kind of sticks out a little bit more than I would probably care for from the back. Like again, I'm not too worried about the backpack itself, but with the sword and shield as well, it's very far out. Like, it just doesn't quite work. And that is kind of a shame because, to be honest, there are certain things that I would want any toy of this design to hit, like certain non-negotiables, and having the sword and shield represented on his backpack, like in a satisfying manner, is definitely one of those, and it's not quite hitting it in this case. And honestly, it's hard not to feel that some of these compromises come from the size of him. I mean, he is actually surprisingly small, which is strange to say because this is still a leader class figure at the end of the day, but when you stack it up versus the 86 Optimus, which is a commander class, and obviously that also has the trailer and all of that other stuff, but that is noticeably larger and kind of, I don't know, just feels a little bit more satisfying as a result. And look, I'm not at all suggesting that I think the Bayformers Optimus should have been a commander class as well, because that comes with a load of additional price point, and I don't think that's the answer either necessarily, but I don't know, I think there's a middle ground between these two somehow, right? Like a little bit bigger, just maybe a little bit more finessed in certain areas, a little bit more paint, and we really could have had something. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that I don't really know what the answer was, but as I say, just sort of somewhere in between, a halfway house between these two toys. Something that you don't have to pay, you know, commander class prices for, but just has that little bit extra than what we got. Is that a thing? I don't know. I do want to stress that I'm not suggesting bigger is necessarily better, right? And, you know, bigger toys, it doesn't mean that they have better engineering or anything like that. And actually, this guy is really complex. I mean, for his size, he stacks up about head height versus some of the other generations primes, and yet he is undeniably way more complex than them. So there's absolutely a lot that's gone into this. I'm not denying that whatsoever. And it's no doubt a very ambitious project. I just think that maybe we're kind of 80% there. It's a tough one though, because equally, I don't think that always just throwing more budget or more money at things is necessarily the answer either. I mean, then you kind of get into the territory of stuff like the T-Spark Rodimus, which is an undeniably beautiful figure to behold, but it also comes with a hefty price tag to boot. And I think by comparison, you know, when you consider the price point that this Optimus is, it's actually quite impressive. Besides, it's not like there aren't more premium options for this design out there already, but then you end up in the territory of stuff like 3.0 and non-transforming efforts. And there's no denying that this thing before me is absolutely gorgeous, but it's also a very different prospect of the Studio Series toy, right? Like, they're fundamentally different things. I don't know, it's almost like sometimes we just need to accept that certain designs are very tricky to do, right? Like with any kind of degree of accuracy, and I think that's exactly what's happened here. I mean, no doubt they've packed in quite a lot to the budget already. I just know that it falls short in just a couple of areas for me. And look, I did say that there was some good and some bad with this robot mode, and I feel like this assessment is sticking true to that. I mean, overall, I am enjoying it. It's just, yeah, a couple of quibbles along the way. But one thing I do think is really great about this figure is the transformation. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And with transformation done, let me just say that most of the doubts that I had about the design of this toy are largely forgotten, because that is an incredible process. It's all just so clever, like the way it twists and turns and comes together, everything clips in exactly as you want it to, it's methodical, it's largely quite intuitive. Like, I don't want to sound silly, but the first time I did this, I did it without instructions, which is unusual for me, admittedly, but I didn't really have that much difficulty with it. It's complex, but it's all kind of laid out in a way that makes sense. And again, I think what really helps that is that it just all tabs together so nicely. Everything slots in, fits together well, it's well built, and it has that feeling of kind of snapping together in a way that just makes it satisfying and fun to do. I enjoy doing this process, and I'm happy to do it over and over again, you know? And the result is remarkably clean, right? Like, that is very tidy considering all of the various panels and folding going on, all the kind of twists and turns. It's really quite something. And you know, there's a little bit of compromise on the back end. I mean, obviously there's a bit of gappiness going on there. You can see his knees just kind of poking out, but I can kind of forgive it for that. Honestly, it does so much right and it's not that bad. And in terms of Optimus Prime truck beds, this is far from the worst. Besides, they covered up what is often my least favorite bit, which is the actual back of the truck itself. Just here, there's a little cover for it, and that often goes forgotten about, so props to them for that. And you know, from any other angle, this thing is just fantastic. I mean, it looks so good. Rolls really nice as well, feels really solid. I love it. And I think in some ways that's why you got to reserve judgment on these things until you experience them in hand, you know, and kind of take them as a complete package, because actually having it in hand and experiencing the transformation, which for many of us is the kind of core gimmick of play here, you know, it's so satisfying that you kind of understand some of the quibbles that it's got elsewhere. And that's not to say that all is forgiven, right? Like, I still wish that sword and shield stored better on the backpack, but taken as a whole package, I definitely think that the good majorly outweighs the bad here. Also worth saying that the finish in this mode is pretty great too. Those flames look on point, the paint is really nice. Also got a teeny tiny little Autobot logo just here. Wheels look good, they're not rubber tires or anything, but there's a nice bit of shiny silver paint. Probably could have done with some of that in the robot mode, really. I mean, in many ways it kind of reminds me of the Volvo VNR Optimus, in that they're both licensed trucks, they're both very satisfying to transform, they're both very clean in their alt modes, and they've kind of got the same appeal going on, although actually this is even more intricate. Now, there is also some weapon storage, the first of which is that you can peg that blade onto the side of the wheel arch here, and then you can store the rest of the weapons on the truck bed using that little adapter piece, which just goes in like so, and then you can take the sword, run that all the way through, and then take the shield, and then that just tabs in on top. And that doesn't look too bad. Obviously the hilt does stick out the back just a little bit there. But hey, as weapon storage goes, I've seen worse. Alternatively, if you untransform the cab slightly and raise all this bit up, you can take the sword hilt, kind of thread it through, or you can do this during transformation itself, of course, and just kind of close that back up again. And you want the sword hilt just sitting either side in there. And then of course you just want to close all of that back up, and it sits quite nicely either side just there, and it will still rattle around a little bit, but then you can take the adapter piece with the shield on, kind of slide that into place like that, and actually that now feels relatively secure, and hey, it looks a lot tidier that way around, right? Alternatively, you can use that peg hole to try out a few trailers. Now, the Earthrise trailer does not work. It doesn't really tab in properly, and it just kind of sits awkwardly here, so it's just a bit of a mess. Doesn't work. By comparison, the Studio Series 86 trailer looks pretty good, I think. I mean, it's still not perfect because it's slightly raised up at an angle towards the front of the trailer, so the back two wheels don't quite sit flush, but visually it works well enough, I guess. It would be nice if it was perfect, right? Like, that would be a great bit of cross-compatibility, so a little bit of a missed opportunity. Overall, though, there really is a lot to like about this truck mode, and actually I think it ends up being one of the major highlights of this figure overall. And whilst the total package may not be the complete knockout that the 86 Prime was, it's still pretty good when you consider it all together. And you know, at a time where we're getting Optimus Prime designs thrown at us thick and fast in all kinds of shapes, sizes and colours, I actually think this represents something just a little bit different, and for that I have to give it some props. Overall then, there's definitely a sizable conversation to be had about this figure, because it's absolutely not perfect. It's definitely got some compromises baked in, and those are worth knowing, but the whole package overall, there's a lot to like here, and I have had great fun messing around with it. So on that basis, taking it all into account, I can't help but think this is a toot. As I mentioned earlier, this video is brought to you by TF Source. You will find a link to their site in the description below, and you can go ahead and check them out for all your Transformers needs. I'd also be very grateful if you could leave me a like for this one, but otherwise that's it from me. So have a great rest of your day, and TTFN.